A lot of this book is about one young ex-Catholic's journey to relive the life that his father had lived, and to find a wife. But if I were gonna rewrite this book, I would make that more explicit because it's not explicit right now. Or is it? Here we go. Chapter 20. The Opal Cathedral, Il Duomo di Milano, dedicated to Her Lady Santa Maria Nascente, stands as one of the most intricate and iconic structures in all of northern Italy. Its 108 meters high exterior, dressed in bends and folds, holds a dozen skyward spirals and 5 enormous wooden doors. Inside, an eastern-facing stained-glassed rose window gauzed with lights lines the cathedral's floor. 40 million specks of dust. We eagerly formed a part of this together with a crowd of grandparents and couples and kids and kneeled locals and photo-snapping tourists. Under the rose window, a choir master with an iron spine stood before an afternoon mass. The choir, warming up, sent multi-voice test notes off the walls and up above, back to the western-facing entrance, back to the rose window, up to the ceiling again to spiral down the columns and up the gallery's temporary scaffolding, onto the floor, then through our temples and into our ears. Once the choir finished warming up, they stood quiet. This allowed their once united sound to further delay and divide amidst the architecture. It wasn't as if their sounds crashed so much as plucked the strings of smoke rising from the incense all around. The choir master, through the fading reverberation, held his wrist poised, his linen sleeves crumpling over his elbows. The way he looked down seemed like he was praying along with the audience, who awaited the next move, wished for more than finely tuned choir, of that finely tuned choir. Then with the snap of his fingers and the flick of his wrist, the choir began in earnest. A cloud parted outside. More stained glass light shone. The audience stopped taking photos. They took deep breaths. It was glorious. I didn't speak Italian, but if I had to guess, the lyrics were about the architects who designed Il Duomo, about their vision of a pitch-perfect building. As the choir sang, I saw sine waves jut out of their mouths and tap the iron rods between the arcs with itty-bitty rainbow hammers, laying mason stone after mason stone between slabs of thick concrete. And the choir, in concert with the murmurs of an astonished audience, fell in rhythm with the tiptoe of 3 fingers along an organ keyboard, all in key with the glowing halo above the heads of a handful of true pilgrims in the audience. The first deep breath outside the Duomo di Milano signaled the start of my appreciation for the finer details. Arcs, hands, fingernails, cuticles, single cells, the universe, of everyday things, their poetry. Neither Rick nor Alex nor I knew what to say, much less how to say it. But that didn't stop me from wanting to talk about what we had experienced anyway. They humored me a little, but then got fed up with that and laughed at my metaphors and suggested we check out some bars. Patting my light pockets, I told them I was too head hurt, so we split. Rick and Alex walked away and I shoveled the cobbled road with my heels on the walk back to the hostel. Good riddance, I figured. Now I can nap, or stare at the ceiling, or whatever, so long as I didn't have to be with them. We start seeing the relationship fray here, and if you don't mind, I'm going to start commenting a little more on what I'm reading out loud, because I feel like part of my brain is reading the word and modulating the sounds. Another part of my brain is anticipating the next line because either I remember what's going to happen or I'm already looking ahead. And then yet another lobe in my cranium is thinking thoughts about what I'm reading. Like, I felt like some of those sentences were a little twisted, even for me. I remember spending a lot of time with that. That's one paragraph I just read, and it's a page and a half. It's a little long. I would edit a lot of this stuff. And if I've learned anything from reading this book, want some? Is that I gotta edit this whole thing. This book is 324 pages long. 26 if you include the ending, which I won't spoil. Yeah, I could easily cut 100 pages from this book, and it'd be pretty solid, very solid book. Anyway, the chapter continues as such. Once at Cielo Azul, the beds in the dorm looked taken. Undone, I mean. Covered in clothes, but otherwise empty, except for Stacy's. She was curled up in fetal position and snoozing. Enough nights had gone without a proper shower. I kicked off my shoes, chucked them under my bed, and popped off a handful of my shirt snaps in one yank. How much longer could I go without it, I wondered, pressing on the hot push faucet. As the room filled with steam, I pictured Stacy walking in. I got hard, but didn't touch it. I had sinned enough the whole damn trip, and something about being in a house of the Lord early that day had got me questioning everything again. Not to mention it was too clean in that bathroom, considering we were 8 animals sharing it. So I felt bad and let only my guilt drop as the blood from my body receded. Wiping the steam off the bathroom mirror with my forearm, I saw the door handle in the reflection turn. Out of instinct, I swung around and jammed the deadbolt. In that jerk, I had gotten hard again. My heart was pounding, my hands trembling, when I bent down to pick up my towel and put an ear to the door. The only sound heard were the squeaks of Stacy's mattress. I banged my fist repeatedly into my open palm as the blood drained from my body yet again. The mirror now reflected more than just a locked door. It reflected the empty room and my naked body. I closed my eyes, opened them, closed them again. Every time I saw my reflection, I was older. Every time I closed my eyes, a light-headed blur edged my darkness and flashed back to the hallucinations I had seen in the nasty co-op restroom not 6 months before. I walked out with the towel around my waist, not bothering to put on a shirt. When Stacy looked up from the pile of folded clothes next to her open backpack, she smiled, shook her head, and stepped into the restroom. It wasn't long before she was drying her washed hands over her short shorts, going back to packing more of her clothes. By then I was dressed and putting on my slip-ons. "Need some spray?" she asked. "For what?" She pinched her nose and fanned the air in front of her. "For your shoes," she said. "I have an antifungal, antiperspiration, anti-all-evil spray." I held the pair up to my face, and in one whiff recalled the entire trip. Crowded Amsterdam, sweaty bike trails through La Loire, bar-hopping Bordeaux, pissing off a Pointe in Firenze. "Yeah," I said, "pass it over." Stacy unpacked the clothes she had so carefully arranged in her backpack, stuck her entire arm inside, and after pulling out the fresh, cold can, shot a chunk of it in my direction, sending shards of peppermint up my nose. "Damn, girl. Just as I suspected. You aren't evil. Else you would have melted." She tossed me the can and watched me catch it with my face still sprayed. She tipped her head. "That's a miracle spray," she said, leaning back on her bed with her palms behind her back. "It's like a restart on your computer for your shoes. Think it'll turn the color of my soles back to white?" "What color are they now?" I held my shoes up for her to see. "Is that blood?" she asked. "I hope just blood." Stacy told me it was worth a shot, literally, she added, making sure I aimed right. She went back to packing while I sprayed my slip-ons and kept an eye on her. She was curious, and I didn't know it at the time, mysterious too. A stranger, sure, but somehow more. She had kept to herself the previous day, and now she was packing, re-rolling the clothes, and stowing away gadgets she probably didn't need. When she got to rolling her boy shorts undies, there wasn't a single ounce of shame or flaunt or anything, just packing. Like this was all summer camp to her. Or maybe we wouldn't hook up. Or maybe it didn't matter. Then she surprised me. Say, what do you do? I walk in circles, I said, tossing her the spray bottle. Come on, what do you do? Are you in school? Just graduated. With? No job. Funny, but what did you study? Philosophy, I said, putting on my shoes. I orbited the room a bit, with my hand on my chin, to check the feel of the floor. She laughed. You like the spray? A miracle. What do you expect to do with a degree in philosophy? I told you, I walk in circles. She rolled her eyes. I have no idea what I'm going to do either. The thing is, I said, finding a clean tile to crisscross, there's a lot I want to do. As in, I want to open a wine bar music venue. Do it. And keep writing music. Do that too. And really what I want to do is learn. I don't know anything. What do you mean? She asked, hopping off her bed and sitting crisscross on a nearby tile. What I mean is exactly that. I don't know anything. I don't know what'll make my family proud. I don't know what'll make me happy. I don't know what to do with the rest of my life. All I know is that I have to learn and work. Definitely get a job. Any leads? I've been working in music festivals, writing promotion, that sort of thing. Stacy told me she had kept a travel journal, had been pretty good about it too, but didn't have the discipline to write. She asked if I liked to write. Songs, yeah, I said. Anything else is more something I find myself being asked to do. You see, I joined the festival thinking I'd book bands, but all they ever asked me to do was write. So I wrote, and ate the free sponsored food. But mostly wrote promo, nothing creative, lest you consider pretending to be excited about a show on a blog to be creative. Sounds like you didn't like to pretend to be someone you're not. Meh. Meh? Meh. I suppose you don't like to talk clearly either. Right, talk, same. Meh. Stacy let out a tisk. What would you write about if you could write about anything? Anything? If I handed you a sheet of paper right now, what would you put down? Oof. Anyway, so pause for some water. I feel like I could have done a better job with the pacing here. So Mikhail and Stacy are in a hostel dorm. There's very low stakes here. Like, what could go wrong? I guess from Stacy's point of view, Mikhail could end up being this crazy mass murderer that shares a dorm with her. Probably. Not likely. There's a lot of back and forth, tossing a spray can around. Mikhail showed some vulnerability by showing the inside of his soul, the inside of his shoe, the sole. I don't think that was on the nose. In fact, I'm thinking about it for the first time right now. But there's blood, there's a history here. And Stacy hasn't shown her soul yet. But what she is doing is trying to dig deeper into Mikhail. And I know consciously I took this moment in the novel to explore Mikhail's thoughts, because right now it's just him narrating, but it's not him giving his opinion, which is what this monologue is about to be. So Stacy asks, what would you write about if you could write about anything? And Mikhail says this, well, fine, okay, dig this. Have you been to Il Duomo yet? Yeah, of course, how could you miss it? Anyway, it got me thinking. Maybe we, and by we I mean us humans, get so caught up on one thing that we forget about other things. Okay, too vague. What I meant to say was if we are acting, then we forget to reflect. Yet when we are reflecting, we never act. If we truly listen, then we cannot speak. Of course, when we try to say something from the bottom of our hearts, we should look for words there, and yet all our words come from outside ourselves. It makes us dumb, literally, as you say. Like, one day, a few cities back, I was tying my hiking boots. When I finished tying one, I went to tie the other. When I was done with that boot, I saw I had never tied the first boot. So I went to tying it for the first time. But when I was done, I noticed I had tied the other boot the wrong way, with the shoelaces parallel instead of perpendicular to the... Anyway, in the end, when I got to the shoelaces and I sorted it out, I woke up and realized I had been dreaming the whole time. So none of it mattered. Okay, now dig this. Have you ever stepped into a room and forgotten why you went there in the first place? Have you ever stepped into a building and forgotten that it's man-made or huge because you were busy, headed for your one tiny classroom? Sure you have. We all have. Same thing with ideas. Oftentimes we walk through a thought and not even notice it because we're attached to the previous thought. Same thing with your ex-lovers. Now, going back to Il Duomo, how are we even sure of where we are and what we're thinking of if we don't chill out for a moment and smell and listen and see and taste and touch what's around us and appreciate it? It took 700 years to make that cathedral, did you know? Someone was like, yeah, lay the foundation right there. No, a little to the left. A little to the right. Perfect. But let's start a generation-long architectural marvel. No big deal. Back then, it must have sounded insane to plan a project of that scale. You realize that? People didn't live over 30. But hell, they got to building, and soon folks must have said, this ain't so crazy after all. And when it was all said and done, I bet everyone partied. But for how long? Guess what happened next? Now they have a sign that charges tourists to go in, snap a photo, and check Instagram during Mass. Sure, some get more out of it than others, but I bet you there isn't a single human being left on this planet who could string me a complete yarn about it. Only bits and pieces. It's as if we're all staring at the same ruin and no amount of scaffolding is going to repair what is falling off. The thing that will outlast the city's skyscrapers. That thing will outlast the city's skyscrapers and no one's going to remember why it got built in the first place. Take the pyramids of Giza, the cave paintings in Lascaux, Stonehenge, the freaking stone heads of Easter Island. What is any of that for? Aliens, reptilians, a farting king? The greatest mystery of all is that people created those things and no one remembers why. And it doesn't even matter. There might as well be no creator, no design. Take this to its logical conclusion, and in 500 years, some evolution of the backpacking 20-something is going to stumble on Il Duomo, the Hadron Collider, read the goddamn Constitution of the United States, and all they will be able to say is, lol, what? Stacy sat there for a minute. Then she nodded her head. People today cannot even agree on what the Constitution means. Right. What are we talking about? What you would write about? I would write about Il Duomo. You love buildings? Not as much as I love people. Are people your weakness? I didn't say they're my weakness, I said I love them. What about women? Do you love them? Every chance I get. Stacy faked a slap across my face. So, she said, getting back to it, people. What about nature? That's fine, I said. Nature, fauna, flora, timeless things. So long as there are people in the mix. The 10th century Chinese painted their landscapes with a tiny little dude thrown in there for scale. Why? Because what good is a mountain if no one is there to climb it? I should like to think that is why we climb, Stacy added, resting on her back. For meaning. Then after taking in a long, deep breath, what about the soul? What about it? You said you wanted to write about timeless things. What about the soul? Depends on what you mean. Soul, she said, almost in a whisper, scooting closer to me. You mentioned the cathedral. A month ago I thought I knew what the soul was. Now I'm not so sure. I lowered my voice to match hers, then asked, and before, what did you think? What I grew up hearing, like everyone else. But I was taught that when our bodies are buried, whatever is left of us goes up to heaven. That is the soul. I think I know what you mean, I said. I was raised Catholic, she said. Same. The light through the double glass doors that led to the balcony stopped shining. The sun was setting. She wanted to say something, but rolled over instead. I don't know, she said. But I like your idea of loving people. Maybe even more than loving someone I can't see, hear, taste, or touch. Not to mention doubt he even exists. My whole life, my parents taught me that I was seeing him every time I opened my eyes, hearing him every time I listened to music, tasted him every time I ate a fruit. But to me, a fruit is a fruit, and a seed is a seed. And if I peel the skin off an apple and cut my finger with the knife, then that pain is just pain, and real. Stacy looked at her hands and made a face like she was imagining blood pouring out of her palms. Goosebumps formed along her thighs. She could burst any minute. I put my hand on her elbow to ground her, but that had formed goosebumps too. I told her she could say whatever she needed to say. I was handing her a blank piece of paper. But she didn't answer. She simply rubbed her legs and looked up at the air conditioning, which was turned off, and then out the arched windows over the glass doors, where the last of red and white Milano sun managed to squeeze by a rain cloud, to soak Stacy and me in some afternoon light, old and tired light. My uncle passed away 3 weeks ago, she said, at the start of the summer. I wanted to go back home, but my dad told me it would be better to stay, to travel. Her eyes glazed with the same red and white of the sun. I don't know what to say. I teared up with Stacy. I am sorry. She rubbed her eyes. It is not anyone's fault. It isn't like I could have saved him. No one could have saved him. No one. Stacy closed her eyes. No one. Not even God. I touched the cross underneath my shirt. Can I ask you something? I heard her say. Anything. Do you believe in reincarnation? I made sure she saw me shaking my head. What about history repeating itself? Does history repeat itself? She smiled as if to say she had tried to be funny, but broke into tears instead. Her sobs wouldn't stop. She was drowning. She pointed inside her backpack, and immediately I reached in there and pulled out a tissue pack. She kneaded a tissue over her nose until it was in shreds. It's just, she began, it's just that my dad and uncle did this exact trip I'm doing when they were my age. It's strange for me to look out at the same cliffs, see the same things they saw, to be where they stood. I have not had much faith since. I want to believe in God again or in anything, but it's hard when I don't even believe in myself. I pressed my lips together and blew my nose into another tissue from the same pack, wondering, why do we repeat ourselves? Why can't we just let go? Would he? What I wanted to say, I soon forgot. Plus, I didn't feel like I could comfort her with words. So I put my hand on her shoulder. Stacy noticed we had both made it to her bed. On the pillow, her head seemed weightless. The strands of her bangs like plumes of golden brown. With her eyes, she asked me something, but I blinked as if to say I hadn't a clue. She sighed, turned to the wall side of her bed, and closed her eyes. No other thought crossed my mind other than I needed to touch her again. Just then she turned to her side, wrapped her arms around my waist. I ran my fingers through her bangs and fixed the parts that were clumped together. The moment I noticed how red her cheeks had gotten, her alarm went off on her phone. My train to Bologna leaves in 45 minutes, she said. Almost forgot. I almost forgot something too, I said. She squeezed my arms. I mumbled my words. She asked me to repeat. Neil deGrasse Tyson said it once. Not only are we in the universe, but the universe is in us. Her eyes blinked the last of that afternoon's tears. It means the answer you seek is inside of you. That simple, she asked. Like a haiku, simple and clean. I agree, she said, her shirt rolling and rolling, her belly exposed. Whew. Gets so intense there, huh? All of a sudden. Existential questions prompted by the act versus reflect debacle from Camus' The Stranger. And a haiku at the end for poetic flair. Poof. All right, well, that concludes chapter 20. What happens next? We need to find out.